Hello friends, welcome back. In this video lesson, you will learn how to think in English. Friends, if you're an intermediate to an advanced English learner, that being if you can understand 50 to 80%, even 100% of my video lessons, you are able to train your mind to think in English. Friends, training your mind, improving your ability to think in English will improve your English fluency. In this video, we'll go through three steps in detail so that you can use these steps to improve your thought process in English and ultimately improve your English fluency. Friends, before we go through the three steps you need to be taking to improve your thought process, to improve your ability to think in English, it's very important to understand why do you need to be able to think in English. Friends, if you're constantly translating from your native language to English while you're having a conversation in English, you won't sound natural. Training your mind to think in English will enable you to have more meaningful conversations and to be able to better express yourself in English. As you are watching this video lesson, I'm assuming that you are at an intermediate to an advanced level of English. So you are ready to train your mind to think in English. Developing the ability to think in English takes time. You may think at times that it's too difficult, that you don't know many words in English, or you simply can't speak in English or do anything in English without translating. Friends, you can, and in this lesson, we're going to go through these three steps. Those steps being immersion, the first and most important step, the second step being say no to translating, and the third step being doing and applying. In order to be able to think in English, you have to be able to understand words, phrases, you have to learn and hear English being used. Friends, this is where immersion comes into play. In order for you to be able to think in English, you have to hear English being used naturally. Immerse yourself in the English language. Friends, the first step to improve your ability to think in English is immersion. Immersion is surrounding yourself with the English language. Now, you may be wondering, how can you immerse yourself in the English language? I know that many of you are watching from different locations around the world. Some of you don't live in English-speaking countries. There are ways that you can immerse yourself in the English language even if you're not living in an English-speaking country. You can do this in various ways. One way of immersing yourself in the English language is by listening to podcasts. There are many great podcasts out there you can use to listen to English being used naturally. You could watch a TV show or a movie in English. By watching a TV show or a movie you like, you'll hear new words, grammar, phrases, expressions being used, which you can use when you are training your mind to think in English. You could even listen to an audiobook. Find an audiobook, somebody reading a book out loud, and listen to them speaking in English. And at the same time, you're also reading a book, well, actually listening to a book being read, but you're immersing yourself in English. You could even listen to a song. Listening to songs is a great way to immerse yourself in the English language. I know I do it all the time in the Croatian language. Find a song that I like, I do a little dance, I have a little fun, and I imitate, I shadow, I sing along. This will enable you to have fun and to immerse yourself in the English language so that you can hear English being used and you're training your mind to think in English. Friends, immersing yourself in the English language will train your mind to think in English because you're hearing English being used consistently. Friends, immersing yourself, surrounding yourself with the English language will help you to think in English. You can't think in English if you don't surround yourself with the English language. You have to hear English being used so that you can train your mind to think in English. We've gone through the first step, how you can start thinking in English. You have to be immersing yourself, surrounding yourself with English being used naturally so that you can hear, listen, understand, so that you can think faster in English. But while you're listening to English being used, no translating, okay? The second step in improving your ability to think in English is to say no to translating. Friends, if you're translating what you hear, if you're consistently thinking of those words or listening to something and thinking about it in your native language, you're not improving your fluency, but you're improving your translation ability. Friends, you want to be a fluent English speaker, you want to think fast. For this reason, you should not translate. If you are consistently translating, you will stop, pause, think. A lot of processing is going on in your brain. When you hear a new word, I want you to think of that word, learn that word in context. Friends, by learning new words and learning new English vocabulary in phrases and in context, it will be easier for you to remember that word and remember how to use that word in the future. Friends, if you are translating one word in English to your native language, maybe that word is not used the same in your native language as it is used in the English language. For this reason, I strongly suggest that you don't translate ever in English if you want to speak English naturally and fluently, because one word can have many different meanings in the English language, and one word maybe is not used in that context that you would use it in your native language. Friends, if you can understand 50 to 80% of this video lesson, then you are ready to use a monolingual dictionary. Do not use a bilingual dictionary. By using a monolingual dictionary, you are also training your mind to think in English. You are reading. So you will see that word, you'll see if it's a noun, adjective, adverb, and you will see the definition. Also with monolingual dictionaries, you will also most likely see a few examples of that word being used. This is training your mind to think in English as you are reading. Reading is also a crucial part of English development and English fluency, and you are reading something in English, hence you're improving your ability to think in English. So friends, say no to translating, do not translate. It will just cause you a headache and frustration and a lot of anger because you're doing a lot more thinking that you really need to do. Stop translating and use those words, learn those words in context. Okay, so in step 1, we talked about immersion, surrounding yourself with the English language so that you can hear English being used more. You can listen to new words, you can practice connected speech. In the second step, we said no to translation. So immersion and say no to translation. Friends, the third step for you to develop your ability to think in English is to use your English. Friends, it's quite simple. You have to use your English. The third step is use your English. Use those words, grammar, phrases, expressions you've learnt through immersion, you've learnt by looking up those words in a monolingual dictionary, and by learning them in context. Friends, when you're using your English, I suggest that you start small. So let's start with those new words and phrases you learnt through immersion and by not translating. Start making sentences with those words. By making simple sentences with those words, you can make sentences in your head, you can talk to yourself, you can write them down on a piece of paper. You are thinking in English. An example of this could be, for example, the word awkward. So awkward may be a new word for you. You don't know what awkward means, so you've looked it up in a dictionary and you found out that the definition of awkward is something or someone that's causing difficulty or someone or something that's hard to deal with. So here, friends, you're training your mind to think in English, but you want to take it one step further. You want to use this new word in a sentence. Friends, talk to yourself. I do understand that it may sound a little crazy, but talk to yourself by making simple sentences. You could make a simple sentence using the present simple. For example, I am awkward, or she is awkward. Friends, by doing this, by making really simple sentences, not only will you remember that new word, but you will remember how to use that word in English, and you're training your mind to think in English, to be able to express yourself. Friends, don't worry about making complex sentences in English. Keep them simple for the beginning. Why not make a sentence using your mother, brother, family, father, auntie, aunt, next door neighbor, whoever it is, use them in that sentence so that you can personalize it and you can remember it in the future. For example, awkward. Who is awkward in my family? My brother is awkward. Or maybe, my mother, she's not really an awkward person. So, my mother isn't awkward. Friends, by doing this, by saying these sentences in your mind, you are thinking in English. So you have learned a new word, you've used this word in English, and you're already training your mind to think in English. Another great way to train your mind to think in English is to write in English. Friends, a lot of English learners really miss this step. I personally love this step and I always suggest it to all of my students that learning how to write in English is such an important skill. If you feel a little bit silly speaking to yourself in English, which I completely understand, put that new sentence down on a piece of paper. Now friends, vocabulary lists and vocabulary books, I know that many of you may have them and some teachers recommend them. I do recommend that you do keep a vocabulary notebook, journal, whatever you want to call it, but don't stop with just the new word and the definition. Take it one step further so that you're improving your ability to think in English by making a sentence with that word in English. Friends, by using your English, by making sentences using those words, either in spoken or written form, you will see your ability to think in English improve. Another great way to improve your ability to think in English is to be writing in English on a consistent basis. Many English learners really forget about this step, but one great way for you to think in English is to keep a diary. Friends, why not write in a diary every single day, every single night? You don't have to write a whole essay, just 5 minutes what you did that day, and you will see that you are forcing yourself to use new phrases, expressions, to express yourself in written form. Therefore, you are training yourself to think in English. Friends, keep a journal, write in that journal every single night. By spending 5 minutes a day writing, putting pen to paper, using those new words, phrases, grammatical structures you've heard through immersion, and by not translating, you will see that you are using, in time, you'll be using new words, phrases to express yourself. Also, you'll see that it'll become easier. The more consistent you are, if you do this on a regular basis, you'll see that it'll be easier to consistently write in English. Another way you can use your English is by chatting on the internet with people in English. Friends, English is a means of communication. Find a pen pal, find somebody online you can chat with in English, and if you're not a fan of keeping a journal or a diary, you can have a conversation in written form with somebody. And again, you'll be forced to use those new words, phrases, grammar, which you've learned through immersion in interaction with people. Start chatting with people online in English and you will see that your ability to think faster in English will improve. Another way you can improve your ability to think in English is to be speaking more in English. Friends, if you're watching this video lesson, you can understand 50 to 80% of this lesson. I know that you can speak in English. Be confident. Everybody gets shy. You do have to start. You will stutter, you'll forget words, but the more that you are speaking in English, speaking to real people, you will see that you're able to think faster in English. You'll also notice the difficulties that you have when it comes to communication. You'll notice that, maybe I'm just translating too much, or maybe I don't know enough words to be able to speak in English. Then you can go back to the first step, that being immersion. So surround yourself with a topic, that vocabulary that you need, and then use that the next time you have a conversation in English. Friends, please note that it does take time to develop the ability to think in English. Be positive, be optimistic, and use your English. Use your English on a consistent basis, immerse yourself, don't translate, use it, and you will see that you will be able to improve your English. If you're still struggling with confidence or need tips for English fluency, make sure to check out this playlist here where I share many more tips to improve your English fluency. Friends, if you need more speaking practice, if you need practice speaking in English and improving your confidence speaking in English, join us in the Using English TP Classroom. Learn more about the Using English TP Classroom by watching this video lesson here. Remember friends, I post weekly video lessons here to help you speak in English. So make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so that you receive the latest lessons. I look forward to seeing you in the comments below this video. See you there. Bye for now.